Devnadi, you may post the share your screen.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Shati. Thanks very much. Let me see if this can be seen once. A very good evening to everybody. Due to certain unavoidable circumstances, Principal Madam won't be able to attend our um, special lecture, but she has conveyed her felicitations and best wishes so that the program is a success. She has especially congratulated and thanked Dr. Aparna Singh, who is the speaker today. So, with Principal Ma'am's blessings and good wishes, we should directly begin the special lecture. Before I will invite Dr. Aparna Singh, who belongs to the Department of English of Diamond Harbour Women's University. I would like to invite Professor Kushal Vishash to introduce us to today's speaker. Kushalda.
Thank you, Devlina ma'am. It's a pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Aparna Singh. She is an assistant professor of English at Diamond Harbour Women's University. She has taught in various educational institutions across Kolkata in the last decade. Her areas of interest include Indian writing in English and Dalit literature. She has published in various national and international journals to date. She has 4 edited volumes to her credit and has worked as a as a copy editor with Sahitya Academy. So, Dr. Singh, ma'am, it is a pleasure to have you with us. And Devlina, ma'am, it's back to you to continue with today's program.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kushal Vishash, for giving us that brief introduction to Dr. Aparna Singh. She has lots of other notable qualities to her credit, which we will not go into today. But since we have already run 10 minutes over time, without further ado, I request Dr. Aparna Singh to please kindly consent to begin her special lecture and her presentation also. A very, very warm welcome to you, Aparna. So
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Devlina. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be invited by the Department of English, Women's Christian College, to deliver today's special lecture. I extend my deeply felt thanks to Principal Ma'am, Professor Dr. Ajanta Paul, for her kind invitation. I'm also grateful to Professor Shoma Roy, Professor Kushal Bishash, Professor Adhar Sheila Chatterjee, and Professor Devlina Gopalan from the Department of English for having me, and the guest listeners who were able to find time from their busy schedule, and the students above all for their vibrant presence and the very tastefully done flyer. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Now, preparing for this talk about Dattani and his play, Bravely for the Queen, resonated more deeply now than ever before. It has been doubly rewarding for me. Not only did I get the opportunity to reconnect with Dattani, because I used to teach Dattani in Murlidhar Girls College for a long time, and he's one of my favorite playwrights. It also was a reassuring reminder that we have reached the post pandemic phase and will be, fingers crossed, be able to go back to the physical space that theater is inextricably associated with, something that we have been missing out on. And theater brings participative social space, a coming together of people who respond to an enactment in a shared social context. So, talking about the Tani is also, I wish we could have had, some good availabilities of some, videos of his plays, which I could not find of Bravely for the Queen. There were videos available of some of the other plays like Muggy Night in Mumbai, and there was also one on, I think, Dance Like a Man, but unfortunately, I could not find any video of this particular play. Now, so this participative interaction can now be renewed after a long gap of more than 2 years now. And this, I think, is especially relevant for the Tani's plays, where the spatial dynamics play such a very important role. Now, I would like to, I've prepared a PPT, so I just like to share those with. Okay, so is the PPT visible?
Not yet, but I don't know. Can others see the PPT?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just 1 minute. Just give me 1 minute. Uh, Devlina, I think, can you just present the PPT, because I think there's some technical
Okay,
problem
okay,
which I'm
sure.
facing. Although I think that I did have Devlina, just give me 1 minute. I'll send you the latest PPT.
Okay, sure.
Just 1 minute. Actually, I've added one slide to it, which was about the one which I was referring to. Um, it seems that I'm so sorry, Devlina. Please do continue with presenting the PPT. I think I won't be able to.
The one I already have?
Yeah, the one which you
Okay.
already had. Yeah. Thank you so much, Devlina.
Okay.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, this is the cover page of the Penguin edition. So, please, can you move on to the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So, Mahesh Dattani, born in 1958, is a prominent modern Indian playwright. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy Award in 1998 for probing the tangled issues of consumerism, communal conflict, and gender in a modern contemporary society. Indian society. He deals with sexuality and gender issues, religious tensions, and the workings of personal and moral choices as he explores a gamut of human relationships. In 1984, he founded Playpen, his own theatre company, and began to look for Indian plays in English, not the usual Western canonical texts that were generally performed. Now, being a theatre person himself, a playwright, a director, and sometimes an actor, his close involvement in the theatrical production of his plays helps to bridge the gap between the text and performance of his plays. Moreover, in a country where Indian drama in English is a contradiction in terms, as a large part of the Indian populace does not find dramatic performances in English very convincing because most of us speak in our native tongues. And so if we think of theater as an extension of the reality that we live, that the kind of English that if you speak English on stage, it doesn't seem very convincing. So bringing Dattani into context, we find that he has given Indian drama an Indianized flavor, and he has decolonized the Indian theatre by indigenizing the English language, and I'll come to it later. So for him, theatre is like a freak mirror in a carnival, destabilizing everything that we pass off as normal. And as you can see in the slide, Michael Walling says, for Dattani, a play is never finished. Plays only really happen in the theatre as ephemeral events. The apparently permanent printed text is just one approximation to what might occur when the piece is performed. Next slide, please. So, although the Indian writer in English has overcome to a large extent the initial charges of pretentiousness, he or she still remains unsure of a clear sense of audience. And then, let me just, give an example of Mulk Rajanand, who actually went to Gandhi for his permission before he started writing in English. So, Indian writers have had a love-hate relationship with the language, and it kind of magnifies more when it comes to the Indian dramatists. So, given the chosen medium of expression, plays which were meant to be performed obviously restrict a wider, more expansive grassroots audience in India. However, that is not exactly the kind of audience that Dattani is looking for, as he claims that he writes for the urban Indian upper and middle class audience and not for working class audience, according to Asha Kuthari Chaudhary. Now, Dattani, however, frankly admits of catering to a niche audience who would respond to his plays on an intellectual level. And he says the audience must arrive at their own answers. The next slide, please. Now, the title, of course, is one of the most discussed topics as far as Bravely Fought the Queen is concerned, and I think one of the most, frequently asked questions also. Now, the title draws our attention with its reference to a valorous queen, and I think the flyer also does a lot of justice to that. Further into the text, we understand the inescapable influence of the poem Jhansi Ki Rani by Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, a well-known Hindi poet. Now, Jhansi was a queen who had a great role to play in the 1857 revolt, right? So that was way back in the mid 19th century. The title is a literal translation of the first line from the poem, which reads, "Khoob ladi mardani, wo to Jhansi wali rani thi." Now, the title reminiscent of the poem significantly drops the epithet manly, because it is the word mardani, which translates as manly, approximately. The closest translation would be manly in English. Now, that is missing from the title. Now, the reason for this conscious change, is to interrogate the implications of manliness itself. I think the title also complicates gender binaries by foregrounding the idea of a combatant queen. Now, valor is generally seen as a male prerogative. Dattani problematizes conventional notions of gender at the very outset. The title itself is like a blow to a certain extent, because he is, bringing the idea of manliness, gentleness, femininity. All that is kind of being brought forth in the title itself. Now, the expression "bravely for the queen" surfaces in a discussion which takes place between the three women, Alka, Dolly, and Lalita, in the last act, just after a discussion on Naina Devi's royal lineage. Lalita recollects the poem while Alka furnishes the details. By now, we have already encountered the staggering discrepancies between the real and the ideal versions of manliness in the second act. The title conspicuously drops the epithet manly. By doing this, Dattani finds manliness an unnecessary and of course an unbecoming qualifier in the transformed socio-cultural context of the present middle-class reality of urban India. Now, hence, this is not an inadvertent or unintentional omission, I would say, considering that Dattani has structured the entire play along binaries. You have the first act, which is called women, the second act, which is called men. So, the binaries are very well defined at the very forefront. The first act is called women, the second men, strictly positioned within the private and the public. The private and the public binaries also become very clear to us. The play delineates the compromised private lives of two sisters in stark contrast to the callous profligacy of two brothers who are also their husbands. Okay, next slide, please. Now, first staged in Mumbai in 1991, "Bravely for the Queen" shuttles between two spaces. Center stage, where a real-life drama strips the mask of hypocrisy from a seemingly normal urban household, and a small rear backdrop from where emerges the most important purpose for the existence of each protagonist. The family in focus is that of two brothers, Jiten and Nitin, who run an advertising agency and are married to the sisters Dolly and Alka. Their mother, Ba, moves between the two households, attached more to her memories of the past than to any present reality. Marital frictions, sibling rivalry, the traditional tension between mother-in-law and daughters-in-law, the darker moments of business and personal dealings. The play takes us through the entire gamut of emotional experience as it winds to a climactic finish. With its relentless pace, crisp idiom, and unflinching insight into the urban milieu, this is a play that confirms Dattani's reputation as India's most influential playwright. Now, the tales, they unfold like a series of Chinese boxes with a history of male violence. Ba's husband was an alcoholic. Although she had talent as a singer, she was brutally suppressed by her husband. As far as Alka and Dolly are concerned, they suffer from violent patriarchal oppression. Jiten and Nitin are running an advertising agency that has run into financial crisis. They are married to two sisters, Dolly and Alka. The two families live in two houses built in the middle of nowhere. And this is something which, Dolly herself says. When the play opens, Dolly Trivedi has a mask on and she's expecting to be taken out later in the evening. Lalita, the emissary from the male world, surprises her with her entry. Their mother-in-law, Ba, is restricted to the wheelchair. She is paralyzed and a widowed woman. Alka is an alcoholic, and at the end, she is dead drunk. Dolly has been beaten when pregnant, which leads to the birth of a spastic child. Alka's husband Nitin is a homosexual and is not committed to her emotionally or physically. Sridhar and Lalita, who are husband and wife, are irritants. They help in precipitating the action. Okay, so this was in brief what the play is about. The next slide, please. Now, the characters, as you see, these are some of the major characters. And interestingly, there are many characters who are not, they are absent. They do not present themselves on stage, but they have a very important role to play. Okay. Now, the next slide, please. Now, as you can see, this slide has been called gender and power politics. Now, the term politics is an interesting term, especially when used in relation to gender and power. In order to understand gender politics, one needs to become aware of structures of domination, even as we belong to those very structures. They might not be immediately visible to us. You might be, how do you define politics when you think of it in terms of gender or culture politics? So this particular word politics is about the unequal relationship between genders. It comes with the assumption underlying expectations regarding gender difference, mostly biologically determined in a society, and also it kind of takes the shape of an ideology, right? And put in that framework of being a good girl, to be put in that bracket of being a good girl, right? So Bravely for the Queen explores these gender politics, the unequal relation between genders as a function of patriarchy, the experience of embodiment and workings of desire. I think the text, rather it is more of a text, and it kind of is also a subtext at times. Workings of desire cannot be disentangled from social relations, which are effects of hierarchical structures of power, gender, and wealth. Now, once we see through the gender politics, identities, and also how individuals are forced to fit into the flawed definitions of normality, right? So all this is normal, and that is where the problem lies. We also get to see the gendered nature of common sense reality. As I said, how can you be a good girl? How can you be a good man, right? So it doesn't necessarily apply for women alone, because at times men also are subject to patriarchal oppression, which is something that you see in a play like Dance Like a Man, wherein there are certain professional paradigms wherein a man cannot become a dancer, is something that is being implied over there, right? So these professional paradigms again are very gendered. They are restricted to certain genders, and they are so strict and rigid that it's very difficult to kind of negotiate them. For example, the idea that women are not good in mathematics, etc. In this play, for example, in Bravely for the Queen, if you love singing and take it as a profession, then you lose respect and might be mistaken for a tawayaf, a prostitute. Having children is a common consequence of marriage, and anything otherwise is not normal. Even the fact that one can show off one's class superiority by asking his or her subordinate to bring a prostitute in the office, or if you choose dance as a profession, then you are not man enough, which is the theme of Dance Like a Man. Hence, when Ba meets out the same kind of oppression, that she herself suffered, she becomes a representative of patriarchal domination without consciously acknowledging it. Also, narrow notions of gendered identity paradigms, for example, heterosexual normativity that forces Nitin into marriage with Alka, is nothing but an eyewash, a forced subscription to heteronormative gender roles. That is, a man must marry a woman, a theme which has been explored in detail in the play Do the Needful. Okay, next slide, please. Now, in the first act, which is called Women, the deferred presence or absence of Ba, presented through the overwhelming sound of the bell, tampers with the presence of the three women characters, Dolly, Alka, and Lalita. And Ba precariously occupies the liminal space between presence and absence, enforcing invisible patriarchal imperatives on Dolly and Alka. The sound of the bell ruptures the possibility of a harmonious relationship between the three women. She keeps on ringing the bell. Plight of the two sisters who have little at their disposal except vain discussions. Both these idealized women, Naina Devi and Jhansi Ki Rani, offer inchoate possibilities of fulfillment. The references transport the two sisters to a state of surrealistic rapture, evident in their mock mimicry of the Rani of Jhansi for the masked ball. The masked ball symbolically encapsulates the theme of camouflage, which is integral to the overall structure of the play. Now, Ba encouraged her sons again and again to throw their wives out of the house as well. She called Dolly a whore and asked Jiten to hit her on her face. He believed it without reason and hit her while she was carrying Daksha. At a point, Dolly mentions that the fate of her mother was also woeful. She too was deceived by her father, as Dolly and Alka were deceived by their brother and put into Trivedi family. Ba called them the daughters of a whore, a keep, a mistress. Okay, next slide, please. As we move into the men's world, we don't really proceed in stage time. We only move ahead in real time. It is a world of wheeling and dealing where women merely function as dispensable intruders. Jiten represents the conventional male who treats women as sex objects and also gets orders to his office. And there is an interesting, here the class dimensions, I think, become more relevant than the gender dimensions, because you have three men, kind of, especially Jiten, trying to kind of get trying to show off his superiority. But here, of course, because they all belong to the same, they're all men, so it's kind of class hierarchy which comes to play here. Now, the discussion on women's feedback on the advertisement is a telling take on the changing socio-cultural contours. Seemingly, people like Jiten are either unaware of or have turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to. Now, the deeply rooted sexism becomes immediately available to the audience through comments like women don't mean most of what they say, or that it is the men who do the buying for them. Men want their women dressed up like that. So even in the market for women's lingerie is driven by men, as they seem to have all the buying power. Ba sees the picture of her husband and her elder son, Jiten. Like on a muggy night in Mumbai, this too is a play that concerns itself with alternate sexuality. Nitin is a homosexual, as we've already said. He's unable to satiate his wife's desire, which is also a source of pain for Alka. And Nitin and Praful had sexual relationship between them, and we learn at the latter half of the play from Nitin's conversation with his mother that Praful tricked him into marrying his sister Alka. So no wonder he had no attraction or concern for Alka, which becomes obvious when he declares that he did not care if Alka stayed there or left or drank herself to death. Okay, next slide, please. Now, as all the characters, they stand exposed in the last act, which is called Free for All. So we are kind of moving away from the binarized structuring of the play. It's the last act, and all the the people come together, the men, women, and everybody else comes together. And when the two worlds, they tend to center violently, in the last act. All the characters stand exposed. The sham and facade is ripped apart. Now, Jolie emerges, as the strongest character, because she drives Jiten, to guilty tears. And there is, so critics have said that probably some part of it is not very convincing, because we cannot imagine Jiten kind of, becoming so emotional and kind of teary-eyed and feeling absolutely guilty for what he had done. But that is where Dolly emerges as the strongest character. She's bravely fighting. She's the bravely fighting queen of Jhansi, who makes Jiten realize his mistake to a certain extent. But that again unleashes another act of violence, wherein Jiten kind of runs over that old woman. So now Nitin reveals his gay relationship with Praful, and the closing spotlight falls on the pitifully huddled figure of Alka in her drunken slumber. Next slide. Now, Dattani's use of symbols in the play is apt and telling. Dolly's face mask, which she is careful not to crack by laughing, but which nevertheless cracks a little later, is a cleverly used symbol. Functionally, it represents the image of normality as housewife, daughter-in-law, and mother, which she presents before Lalita and the world in the opening pages of the play, but which cracks open as the dark and sad secrets in her life tumble out. The beggar woman, who is occasionally referred and at the end knocked down by Jiten, represents probably the guilt-laden burden of the past, which Jiten would destroy if he could. Now, Ba's wheelchair and bell perhaps signal more than the old age and paralytic condition. Reference to the singing of Ba as well as Dolly's mother, which was banned, suggests the codes of patriarchy. Now, the Tumris of Naina Devi, played over and over again on the stereo system, simultaneously evoke and comment on the yearning for love and an unfulfilled experience by the major characters in the play. Lalita's passion for growing bonsai is symbolically reflective of her own mindset. The wiring and trimming she subjects growing plants to may well be what she has done to her own life through control and restriction. But at least she has the control on her own life. The result may be attractive and unusual, but it can become ugly and grotesque, like the bonsai kept on Sridhar's office table. The bonsai presented to Dolly and Nitin in the office is a clear symbol of the deformed relationship the brothers have with their wives. Again, Lalita gives instructions about the regular watering and nourishment of the bonsai even before leaving Dolly's house. She waters the bonsai by cupping her hands, which symbolizes that though dwarfed, relations too need caring. Kanhaiya, a non-existent one, is the most potent symbol in the play. The fantasy of Kanhaiya, who is both present and not present in the empty space beyond the kitchen door, symbolizes Radha's eternally young lover Krishna in Indian mythology. Krishna is forever available to die for believers like Radha and Meera whenever they wish him into existence and being. The next slide, please. Now, the fringe issues, making the invisible visible. In his place, Dattani takes on what he calls the invisible issues of Indian society. In an interview, Dattani says, you can talk about feminism. I quote, this is what he says in one of his interviews. You can talk about feminism because in a way that is accepted, but you can't talk about gay issues because that's not Indian. That doesn't happen here. You can't talk about a middle class housewife fantasizing about having sex with the cook or actually having a sex life. That isn't Indian either. That's confrontational, even if it is Indian. By pulling taboo subjects out from under the rug and placing them on stage for public discussion, Dattani challenges the constructions of India and Indian as they have traditionally been defined in modern theatre. He encourages other playwrights to do the same. He says, I quote, our culture is so rich with tradition, and that's a great advantage and a great disadvantage as well, because we are living in the present and there are so many challenges facing us. You just have to cross the road and you have an issue. I think it is very important for our country to spawn new playwrights who reflect honestly and purely our lives, because that is our contribution to the world. So, Dattani touches on zones of experience that the so-called respectable middle class, upper middle class would happily shove under the carpet. He addresses issues, as I've said, domestic violence, gender oppression, family politics, complicity of the mother-in-law in the patriarchal setup, hypocrisy in the haloed institutions like marriage, homosexuality. And all these engagements allow Dattani to unmask the ideological pretensions that we as Indian society uphold. The next slide, please. Now, he uses decolonizing Indian theatre. Now, he uses Hindi inflections and he firmly roots his play in the upper middle class family dynamics. Dattani seems to contribute to the matrix of the processes that Erin Mee, one of his critics, and he has written quite a number of books on Dattani. Erin Mee refers to as a way of decolonizing the theatre without, however, resorting to a politically driven search for an indigenous aesthetic and dramaturgy. That motivated the writers of the theater of roots movement. Okay, so he's not like the writer of the theater of roots movement, using the dramatic tools left over from the colonial era, such as the proscenium, stage, and other paraphernalia, along with the language itself, which he declares is an English developed in India, a hybrid language that is spoken in a unique, uninhibited manner. Dattani begins to simultaneously subvert the borrowed structures with his almost subconscious use of accents, clothes, music, cultural moorings, and beliefs specific to the context of the play. In a play like Bravely for the Queen, he makes Bars speak in a particular accent, which is different from the others. Of course, we understand that, Bar will not be able to speak in the same fashion as the others. So you have quite a lot of, Hindi words which have been which has been integrated in the fabric of the play, and they kind of don't stand out, stand out in the sense that they are not like a fish out of water, but the way he uses it, he integrates it with the structure of the play. And that, I think, is decolonizing the language to a large extent. Now, the next slide, please. Now, stage, I was trying to find a good picture in the internet, but I could not find anything which was relevant as far as Bravely for the Queen was concerned. So I did have another slide which I had inducted in between, but unfortunately I can't show that. The stagecraft is a very important aspect of Dattani's plays, and if you look at the stage setting, if you have the text, you will see that the stage setting for Bravely for the Queen is like this. Upstage center is dominated by a well-stocked bar. On a higher level is the bedroom of Jiten and Niten's mother, referred to as Bar. She is bedridden and is visible through the screen wall. When it is backlit, a staircase is visible along with a small landing which leads to both Bar's bedroom and Dolly's bedroom off stage. Upstage left is a largish window overlooking the front of the house. Next to it is a stereo system and music can be heard. It is a thumri sung by Naina Devi. Downstage left, exit to the kitchen, and downstage right is the main door of the house. And now I want you to compare this with the stage setting in Tara, the play that preceded Bravely for the Queen. A multi-level set, the lowest level occupies major portion of the stage. It represents the house of the Patels. It is seen only in memory and may be kept as stark as possible. The next level represents the bedsitter of the old Chandan in a suburb of London. So there are, three levels of stages, and they are very clearly there. And I had a picture of that, wherein you find, Dr. Thakkar as the presiding deity. He remains seated throughout the play, and he kind of is a very pompous person who keeps boasting about what he has done. So although he doesn't watch the action of the play, so he's there, right at an elevated level, and he kind of is a haloed man, kind of a presiding deity, like a god with a godlike presence, and that is what even Dattani says. Although he doesn't watch the action of the play, his connection is asserted by his sheer godlike presence. Now, the trademark Dattani stage often uses the various levels to create theatrical resonance in a special way. Now, for instance, the level where Bar is placed remains a constant in all the acts, and the time shifts that occur in terms of her memory carries the audience back and forth in time. Even in the present seems to parody the past. The multi-layered reality in the play, suggested by the split stage levels, more constantly into an internalized reality, as it were, and it becomes much more clear in the last act. Dattani makes the stage space to stand for interior or exterior space, the public and the private, the secret and the open space, the physical, the mental space. All these are divided through these different levels, acting areas and different levels. We constantly shuttle between the external and internal realities, an intersection of the present and the past, a close ally of the modernist stream of consciousness technique. These realities overlap, contest, corroborate, and feed into each other, and the effect is almost surreal. The multiple realities are at times difficult to dissect. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I think one of as I mentioned earlier, there are some characters who never come on stage, but they have a very strong presence. Now, Praful by default is the absent partner in the homosexual relationship that existed between him and Nitin. Now, desire, often misplaced, becomes one of the major concerns in the play and often borders on the wrong side of the binary. If you think of binaries like normal or perverse, moral or immoral, Kanhaiya, Praful, the auto rickshaw driver with strong black arms, and the prostitute whom Sridhar uses as an object to vent out his revenge on Jiten, all remain absent, endorsing their illegitimate presence. Absence of the old beggar woman approximates to a tragic presence in the final act as she is mercilessly run over again and again by Jiten. She shuttles between visibility and non-visibility. In the first act, her mitigated presence becomes available to the audience through Dolly's subversive denial and subsequent indifference. I just quote from the text where Dolly says, "That wretched woman is back. Where's that watchman? She sneaks in all the time. She keeps shuttling between my house and Alka's. Very clever. She comes in late and leaves early." Now, this undesired presence of the old beggar woman is shrouded in obscurity, and her death in Jiten's unexplained misdemeanor. Her death, however, reinforces her presence with resounding certainty, because we know that she's there. She's not, an extension of somebody's imagination. She's very much there because she is dead by the end of the play. Now, she becomes a symbol of marginalization. Her anonymity and invisibility acquire a contingency hitherto suppressed even by the other women characters. Her low economic and social status deprives her of agency. She embodies muted vulnerability, which contests the image of the queens, the Rani of Jhansi and Naina Devi's royal background. Dattani here draws an eclectic range of characters that cut across class and caste barriers. Dolly and Alka don't belong to the polarization presented by royalty and abject penury. Economic independence, however, eludes them. You see, so this is interesting, they kind of are brought on the same level. Although their husbands belong to the business fraternity, we cannot ignore the constant threat of expulsion from home that looms over Alka. Hence, the two sisters and the old woman share the same insecurities of homelessness, despondency, and imminent absence. Lalita belongs to the middle class, and as the wife of the employee Sridhar, her actions are mostly determined by her social position and her function as a dramatic catalyst. The act of murder is a heinous assertion of male supremacy precipitated by the firm-footed rebuttal from Dolly in the last act. Dolly says, "No, I will not let you get away so easily. They were your hands hitting me, your feet kicking me. It's in your blood. It is in your blood to do that." Now, the final catharsis that she forces Jiten to go through is a way to resolve the knotty affairs from deep-seated agonies in past. It is his last attempt to show his brazen nonchalance, which has been convulsed by Dolly's incriminations. Daksha, the incapacitated child, is a product of the violence that he unleashed on his pregnant wife. As he undergoes an emotional turmoil, reliving those guilt-laden moments, he's palpably perturbed. And Sridhar then says in that moment of panic, he's running over her, he's running the car over a beggar woman over and over, he's killed her, he's gone. Now, this act of repetition suggests Jiten's emphatic efforts to delete all past memories. Killing an old beggar woman is an easy way out because the regular legal trappings of a murder can be easily evaded. Moreover, she's an embodiment of his guilt and a source of his catharsis, which centers on the paradox of violence begetting violence and the objectification of women. Now, Ba's husband represents her traumatic past. She becomes the mad woman in the attic who has suffered the loss of agency and hence identity. Gilbert and Goober analyze images of female characters in their restricting historical, economic, social, and cultural context. The Mad Woman in the Attic, the book by them, assuming the influence of gender on creativity and on the anxiety of authorship, they make their classic argument, which was a hallmark of second wave feminist criticism, that 19th century female writers bridled against misogyny and submerged their rage beneath orthodox male formula. As if to raise consciousness, they uncover and foreground this female subtext. Ba's schizophrenia is the result of denial and emotional deprivation she has received from her husband. Ba's breakdown is a breakdown of rationality. The disembodied images which haunt Ba repeatedly reflect the loss of self she is inching toward. The dismembered recovery of the past, obsessively imaged in her husband's display of violence, finds a reiteration in the last act, where Dolly suffers from a similar physical oppression, foregrounding the culturally ingrained stereotypes of women. Jiten is a prototype of his father's brusqueness. Jiten's presence reflects his father's absence, evident in the vaguely revealing, regressions of Ba. Jiten hitting his wife is a replication of the atrocities meted out on women in the family, but Ba is unable to stop this abominable legacy in spite of being a victim and a vehement opponent herself. Now, the dead husband is an imperious man with a dark countenance who was against Ba's singing inclinations. Having left her ambition to become a singer, she is divorced from her own identity and lives her life vicariously through her children. He ensured that Ba forsake her career as a singer and confine her interests within home. Now, reconstructing the father as a dark man may be understood as synonymous with asserting her relationship with the hostile external world or the stereotypical other. Nitin is regarded as beautiful as he has taken after her and not inherited his father's looks. Uh, Now, the vivid descent into the past is one of the ways in which life is breathed into the absent characters. Uh, Okay, so although invisible herself, Bach carries this acerbic legacy of the past and ironically becomes his unwitting defender. Profull's deceptions are revealed not through the delayed presence of the absent characters, but through a letter which reverses the hegemony of the spoken word over the written. The absent mother's identity is established, leading to a series of invectives transposed on those present, Dolly and Alka. Ba says, "Your mother is a keep, a mistress. My sons have married the daughters of a whore. Your mother," Dolly says, "Your mother never understood that. She blamed it on us," etc. So, the play covertly treats catharsis as its a principal motive, as the two sisters rediscover their past and renew their bonding. The absence of sisterly love, which often borders on one-upmanship and bitter bickering initially in the first act, is replaced by a deep sense of mutual understanding by the end of the play. And Kanhaiya, the idealized lover, encapsulates the dreams and fantasies of women who have been denied legitimate means of fulfilling their desires. The next slide, please. And with this, I come to my last slide, which is on the various critics, who have commented on Dattani. Shubir Dhar considers Dattani the Sachin Tendulkar of Indian theatre. Miruna George says Dattani condemns the dishonesty and insincerity in relationships. He does not criticize homosexuality. Sexuality is identified as one way of realizing the self. And Michael Walling says this is a play about performance and uses the theatre to demonstrate how, in a world of hypocrisy, acting becomes a way of life. And that's it. My final slide, please. And thank you so much for your patient hearing. I would want your feedback, your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh, for such a scintillating presentation. And what I find even more admirable and remarkable is that you have maintained the restraints of time that I told you to condense Mahesh Dattani's Bravely Fought the Queen in such a comprehensive manner over such a short period of time is truly, truly admirable. Students, those who are present over here, would any of you, or even some of the professors who are here, would any of you like to ask any questions related to the play? Semester 2 students haven't completed the play, but if any semester 4 students are interested, or semester 6 students who've done the play already, any questions that have come to your mind while listening to the talk or while you had done the play during the relevant semester, please feel free to ask those questions right now. You could also write down the questions in the chat box if you don't wish to, ask them.
Devlina ma'am, while the
Yes.
students, yeah, while the students are maybe putting their questions together, if this is something that doesn't take Dr. Singh too long to answer, I just would like her feedback on the English that is used in the play. I mean, I was fascinated to hear that you said it's a kind of decolonizing of English, right? I was wondering whether there is any specific feedback from Western critics about the English that is used.
For in particularly in for the Tani's case, I mean,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, and
okay.
in this play, or other Dattani plays as well.
Erin me has said about, he has, as I mentioned, he talked about the use of language as a way of using the Englishman's language, to kind of write back to them by restructuring it. This is something which African writers have been doing. But here you find that the Hindi inflections, or the way in which the accents are. I'm sorry, Professor Biswas, I don't know of any other critic who has commented on this particular usage of English. But I think this was because Dattani himself says that uh, when we think of theater, we think of it, as I said, an extension of reality, and that is why people go to watch theater. They say, kind of see a reflection of the kind of life that they're living. So language becomes then again a major barrier for them. To make English, or to kind of make it more amenable to the people, so that they are not kind of alienated by the language that is being used. That was one of the major, because the Tani keeps on telling that this is our bread and butter, and we need to kind of not alienate the audiences. We have to find, and then theater cannot exist in a vacuum. So the language needs to be more in tune with the kind of language we use, or we speak at homes, which again is something of an homogenization, because all of us don't speak in English at home, and most of us don't. So I think that's a very, very tricky terrain to enter again, the language aspect. But I think that Tani does a fairly good job at it, by not kind of sticking to the BBC English, by not, although many of his plays have been commissioned by the BBC, which is very interesting again, but yet he makes it a point not to keep it that to keep it sacrosanct, so to speak. But I'm so sorry, I don't know anybody else who has commented on this kind of the language usage, except for Erin me.
Yeah, but that'll do fine, ma'am. I mean, I just asked because that very word, decolonizing and
Yeah.
decolonizing of language, it suggests the kind of response we, the people doing the decolonizing, would have. I was just wondering whether, the colonizers would respond to it in a certain way. That's all. Uh, it's basically doing to English what John Agard had done to English in the West Indian context, I would say. But yes,
Absolutely, absolutely.
thanks for the intervention. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I don't yet see any of the students have, asking any questions. So while I don't know if they're going to ever muster up the courage or whatever to ask questions. Aparna, I would like to ask one question. While you were talking about symbols, okay, you mentioned in your slide about Alka's dance in the rain.
Right.
And I have always been very fascinated by that, because it seemed very Bollywood-esque,
Right, right,
having her dance in the rain. So
right.
maybe if you could just tell us a few words about that.
Yeah.
And another question, or first you discuss this and I'll ask another question, okay?
Right, right. You know what? I think it kind of deconstructs uh, uh, you know uh, that kind of uh, he- Dattani is questioning the way in which the dance in the rain in the Bollywood, the Bollywood songs that we have, and the way in which the heroine dances in the rain, it is a kind of a romanticization which is being deconstructed here to a large extent. Because when you see Alka dancing in the rain, of course, it's kind of breaking free and allowing yourself to do what you want to. She wanted to dance and she dances, but she's all drunk and her kajal gets smudged and she's absolutely not looking as pretty as the heroines look in Bollywood. So he's kind of not eulogizing it, rather he is with a tongue in cheek. There is a tongue in cheek attitude, I would say. He's seeing it, deconstructing it, and showing it as maybe there are counter motives here. One is that you want to go and dance in the rain, but ultimately you don't end up looking pretty and all beautiful, and you end up looking as absolutely marginalized once again. So there is he is making, to a certain extent, making fun of that idea where a woman kind of goes into the rain and with her sari clinging on her body and she's looking pretty and beautiful. But that is not what happens with Alka, as you see.
Thank
Uh,
you so much.
uh,
And
uh,
okay, Shomadi, you could. Otherwise, I was going to ask my second question
no, no.
related to.
Then why don't you before I say anything?
Okay, it's related to what Dr. Singh just now said, about the tongue-in-cheek humor in the play. We all usually talk about the problems in the play, mostly, okay, because that is very noticeable and evident, all the complexities in the play. But I would like to also, if you could say a few words on, the subtle humor in the play, whether it's ironic or whether it's tongue in cheek, even the naming of that product, Revati, anglicizing it, or Lalita being, this kind of bumbling lady who comes into the play, and or Sridhar oblivious to people who get angry around him, and so if you could
Yeah,
comment on that.
I think with Sridhar and Alka, it's more of a class issue, because they are they are they are the employees. They are not on the same level as the Trivedis, and they have to keep their jobs intact, especially, of course, the husband Sridhar. So he has to bow down, he has to wilt under a lot of things. So, and that is why he takes that revenge of his. Uh, these are, because the class aspects in the play are not very overt, but they do form a very significant, they are part of that significant undercurrent in the play, and we cannot ignore it. The fact that Sridhar has to subscribe to the notions, or to the notions of patriarchy, or to the way an advertisement has to be done, and he has to keep on agreeing to most of what Jiten is saying, although what a perverse, self-indulgent man Jiten is, but he has to do that because he wants to keep his job in place. So the class aspects, the class context also come into play over here. And I think one of the and even Lalita, so they are more of irritants, they are more of catalysts in the play, who let the to allow the movement of the play. So they present a particular class, I would say. And what did you say in the beginning, Devlina? I missed out on that.
No, beginning was, I was basically talking about that sense of humor, the comic.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the best things about Dattani is that he has this very interesting way of putting things. And if you look at a play like Where There's a Will, you find the ghost of the patriarch hanging himself upside down at the end of the play. So it's a ghost, and he has this strange notion that he will not let the women in the family unite after his death, and not the women, the family will always be in discord, because that is how he has written his will, and it will force his mistress to come and stay with them, but then he realizes that the women bond, and his ghost is absolutely disappointed, and then by the end of the play the ghost hangs himself upside down. So that sense of humor is something that is very much a part and parcel of Dattani's work. And the only play which he says I could not bring in any sense of humor was the play wherein he deals with child molestation, wherein he not Seven Steps Around the Fire. It is 30 Days in September. Yes, the play which is called 30 Days in September, which is about the kind of problems that children face in their own homes. That is one of the only plays wherein he says that I could not bring in humor over there. So most of his plays, even when he's dealing with very, very serious issues, the humor is something that is very much a part and parcel of his work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Shomadi, sorry for interrupting you. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Singh, for your the way you've done it. The PPT and the way you went about it. I thought it was very well organized and methodically done. I really liked it, and I just wanted to say that I haven't read enough Dattani to ask you any question about Dattani per se, but I just wanted to ask you, because I should teach a lot of, I've read a lot of Tennessee Williams, and there are times when I find that he reminds me, the little that I've read, of course, reminds me of some of the things that Tennessee Williams tries in his plays. So in that context, I would like to ask you, do you find in his the theater drama that he produces, that he writes, do you find meta-theatrical devices? Because I do. So I just wanted you to just make like 2-line comment on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Professor Roy. I think that's a very pertinent remark that you made, the meta-theatrical elements in the play, which kind of attract attention to its own theatricality.
Exactly.
Right. I think one of the ways in which he does is through the split level stage, the fact that Yes. I think that is the way in which he does it, and he's constantly, the fact that we can kind of know that it is theater, and we are constantly aware of that. He ensures that we are aware that we are watching theater. I think.
Yes, thank you so much. I because I keep on seeing this, where
Right.
he's dealing with several layers and levels of reality.
Right.
Play of the realities in a meta-theatrical manner. I find that very fascinating. Thank you.
I would request Professor Roy. I would request you to just read the last act, if you can, of this particular play. Yeah, you'll find that you are kind of shifting between time zones, between consciousnesses. You are moving between Jiten's subconscious, and you are moving into Ba again. In a split second.
Excellent. I would like to read that. Certainly.
You'll get an idea of how he's kind of theatricalizing the whole idea of the stream of consciousness technique. I would say he's actually using that over there very much. Sure. I found a lot of parallels and similarities over there in the way in which he's entering into the consciousness of, and it's not easy to project that on stage, because stage has a physical reality, but he does that fabulously, in the last time.
Thank you so much. And by the way, could you leave like a primary source bibli kind of thing with Devalina so that I can read them? Devalina can advise me what else to read also.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Devalina, for bringing.
Thank you, Shomadi, and thank you, Dr. Singh, for answering the questions and queries. Girls, do you have any questions to ask, or some of our guests who are here, would you like to ask anything that intrigued you or interested you while you were attending the special lecture?
Ma'am, can you please elaborate on the role of Kanhaiya in the play? Because like Kanhaiya has always fascinated me.
Right. Kanhaiya keeps fascinating all of us, I think, because Kanhaiya is a character who is an imaginary character, but whether that kind of unfulfilled dreams, he kind of externalizes the unfulfilled dreams and passions of women, and he is not particularly somebody whom we can only associate with Dolly. He's somebody who stands for eternal love, eternal uh, you know we fantasize Kanhaiya as somebody who is the perfect lover, somebody whom we can go back to when we are unhappy. As Dolly is that typical middle class housewife who has nothing to fall back on to but her fantasies of Kanhaiya. So he is that imaginary creation of her imagination, but he also is eternal, and probably he represents the unfulfilled desires of women across ages, across spaces, I would say. Because he does not exist, as you know, towards if you I'm sure you've read the play Abhishekta, but towards the end, if you see Lalita thinks that he's a real he exists, but then she realizes that he does not. So that kind of an fascination, so that mythical element of Krishna, Kanhaiya, who can dance with all the women at the same time, that kind of that he embodies passion, he embodies eternal love, he embodies desire, and he also embodies an escape. Women can kind of an alternative reality, rather he embodies an alternative reality, which is a respite for women like Dolly. They can dwell into that alternative world and find peace and find solace and find love, which they are not finding in their real lives. So that is what Kanhaiya stands for.
Thank you so much, Aparna. There's another question in the chat box. Abhishekta, I'm anticipating you thanking ma'am. Okay.
Yes.
Shushmita Debnath has asked a question. Ma'am, we all see how much care and love it takes to grow a bonsai. Does it show Lalita's longing for a child?
That is not something that Dattani makes very clear to us. But if that is a longing for a child, I would say that again she's kind of, because bonsai is it is something which is forced into a particular shape. There is a sense of coercion that goes into making a bonsai. It is not naturally, a tree is not allowed to grow naturally, so it is forced into a particular shape, a particular structure, so there is a sense of, I think, a coercion in it, which I wouldn't actually recommend for somebody who would want to bring up a child. I would say, not something that a mother would want to do to her child. And if she is doing that, then I wouldn't say that it is something which is desirable, right? So love for bonsai, I wouldn't say is Lalita's longing for a child, but of course the fact that she has things under her control, the fact that she is fussing over the bonsai, so there is a sense of a neurotic fussing over the bonsai, the way she's constantly engaged with it, and she has to protect it and she has to keep it. So there is a sense of keeping things in control, of having life under control. So I think that is what it signifies, and also of course the bonsai is in at one time or the other in the play, it kind of gets, it is connected to all the other characters also. So the way in which their lives are all thwarted, the way their lives are restricted, that also is reflected through the bonsai.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. There's another question asked by Devika Sharma. She is saying, it is evident that Ba does not like Dolly and her elder son Jiten is the very embodiment of her abusive husband. Then what explains her affection for Daksha and Praful? Daksha can still be explained as she's her grandchild, but why Praful?
Okay, if you've read the play, Devika, you would find out that, Praful was playing with Daksha and she had seen it, So she had, because this lady is suffering from schizophrenia, she is suffering from a memory loss, and she's kind of trapped in the past. She cannot escape that. In those ruminations, in those sudden insights that we get of the past through her, we understand that she had seen Praful playing with Daksha, right? And probably that made her think that Praful is the only person who loves Daksha, and that is why she says that he will be the trustee. Am I clear? Devika?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
I think we've got quite a few questions, and if nobody is coming up with any more questions, then I think I will just quickly deliver the vote of thanks. Anybody else? No. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank our principal madam, Dr. Ajanta Pal, for her unstinting support in whatever we do. Although unfortunately today she could not be with us present at the special lecture, but as I said before, her encouragement, her good wishes, they are what keep us spurred on to hold more and more such special lectures. I would like to thank Dr. Aparna Singh for generously and so selflessly giving up her time, as well as sacrificing probably a bit of rest to enlighten us on Mahesh Dattani's Bravely Fought the Queen. Thank you very, very much, Aparna, on a personal level and of course on a professional level. I am truly grateful to you for giving us so much of time and so much of academic enrichment today. So thank you once again. I'm grateful to the Department of English, all the students, and of course my colleagues, Shomadi, Kushalda, Adhar Sheila. Without your encouragement and support, I think most of the things that we have, academic or non-academic, wouldn't have been possible. I would like to thank Shathi, Professor Shathi Naik, who has been our technical support today and in our other events that we've had online. Shathi, I never get to thank you often enough because usually the vote of thanks is right at the end and we're very anxious to wrap up. So thank you. I don't say it enough, but today, I'm going to keep repeating the thank you. I would also like, since, our guest speaker has mentioned the flyer so often and a lot of people have praised the flyer, I would like to thank our ex-student, Shrestha. She has created and composed this beautiful poster on Bravely Fought the Queen, as well as the other webinars that we've had before this. So Shrestha, although you're not present here today, we are very, very grateful for such a beautiful creation. And last but not least, of course, I would like to thank all the students who are present here and the professors who have given us their time today to be with us at this special lecture, whether on YouTube or whether on Google Meet. Thank you very, very much. It is your presence that actually motivates these kind of programs. So thank you once again and good evening.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'd just like to thank Dr. Devalina Gopalan for being our HUD and organizing everything brilliantly. Thank you.
Thanks, Shomadi. That needn't have been mentioned. But thank you, Aparna, once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for patiently hearing me out and for your wonderful questions. And I'm really grateful for them. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the conclusion of the program. Thank you, everybody. You all may leave one by one. Kushalda, are you saying something?
No, I was just about to clarify that whether we could, in fact, formally sort of bring this to an end. And then I'd also just like